Happy Earth Day. Welcome to our EV Charging Symposium sponsored by Doylestown Township, the Bucks County Planning Commission, and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Thank you for joining us today. Our goal is to provide you with information you can bring back to your organization about the benefits of EV charging for your shoppers, your renters, or your employees. We are doing this in the hopes that your organization will find a good fit for what type of charger might work best at your location. As you know, electric vehicles use renewable energy, so by installing EV chargers, you are helping to slow the growth of greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. This is your Earth Day good deed. I'm Judy Dixon. I'm a Township Supervisor elected in 2023. I'm also the liaison to the Environmental Advisory Council, also known as the EAC. The EAC, briefly, is a volunteer group of residents who research and provide good information on environmental solutions and practices to the township. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. First is Curtis E. Sawyer. Kurt will review EV charging basics. Kurt is a retired financial executive, having served as a CFO of 2 publicly traded companies, as well as several private companies. He holds a BA in economics from Stanford University and an MBA in finance. He and his wife have lived in 7 states and chose to live in Doylestown for their retirement. They've been here since 2012. Kurt is a green energy enthusiast and currently serves as vice chair on the Doylestown Township's EAC. Our next panelist is Sean Green. He will be speaking on a regional perspective on charging. Sean is the manager of the Office of Freight and Clean Transportation at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Sean's primary responsibilities are conducting transportation conformity demonstrations and assisting with congestion mitigation. Sean received his Master's of Science in Community and Regional Planning from Temple University, and he has been working on air quality and clean transportation issues with the DVRPC for the past 20 years. Our next speaker is Evan Stone. Evan's going to talk about EV adoption. Evan is the executive director of the Bucks County Planning Commission, where he oversees a staff of 24 professionals. He is a graduate of Penn State University and brings over 33 years of experience. In addition to his administrative duties, Evan works on a wide range of planning projects, including municipal comprehensive plans, facilitating the public planning process, zoning ordinance development, and land use. Evan is married with 2 adult children and resides in Plumstead. And our last speaker is Dr. Jim Baldessari. Jim's going to talk about setting up an EV charger. Jim is a retired research physician with a strong interest in local and global environmental issues. He's lived in the township since 1993 and served on the township's EAC for 8 years, including 2 years as chairperson. Jim is primarily interested in advocating for local solar energy, electric vehicles, and trees. Lots of trees. So there are our panelists. The way this is going to work is we are going to have each panelist, just full disclosure, before I might, many of us are EV owners, just saying. The agenda is about 10 minutes for each panelist. That'll leave us about 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. We are recording the discussion, so we will ask if you have questions to use a microphone. Andrea will bring those around. Lastly, restrooms are in the back, emergency exits are here, and here if needed. And please welcome Kurt Sawyer.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to start us off very basic. For some of you, this will be very rudimentary. Please bear with me. I just want to make sure we're level set on this. Current EVs basically are just a big battery 1 or 2 electric motors, software to make it all work, and a car body wrapped around it. Current models typically have 75 to 100 kilowatt hours of power in the battery. That's good in the car for 250 to 300 miles of range. To give you a sense of how much electricity that is, that would run the average house for 2 to 3 days. So it's a lot of energy. The average car or light truck in the U.S., and these are 2023 stats, travels 13,500 miles annually, which is about 37 miles a day. So if you've got 300 miles of range and you travel 37 miles a day, do you have to charge every night? No. Most of us that have done this for a while find that we're charging once or twice a week. EVs may look a little exotic, but fundamentally, they're basically just a big battery you can plug into any electrical outlet. Electrical outlets are ubiquitous. There are billions of electrical outlets in the United States. So theoretically, they could charge virtually anywhere. So why has there been this discussion about providing electrical power for EVs? Well, the limiting factor is the speed. If you plug into a household outlet, that's 120 volts, 15 amps, nominally 1.8 kilowatts. That would take over 2 days to fully charge a depleted EV battery. So it's slow. You can charge there, but it's not fast. So EV charging has been designated by level. This is just nomenclature. So level 1 is a household outlet, right? Slow, but everywhere. Level 2 is an upgraded charger. It is a 240 volt AC circuit. That can range from 30 to 70 amps. You're going to get overwhelmed by numbers here. What you should think of this as is the outlet that you plug an electric dryer into. That's kind of what it is. So what it can do is it can charge a depleted battery overnight. And there are some little variations in a particular one car versus another, but at the end of the day, these are fast enough to charge it while you sleep. Level 3, which is also known as a DC fast charger, and you'll hear those two terms interchangeably. This is where the real power is. These are 50 to 350 kilowatts of power running at either 400 or 800 volts DC. This is what you see alongside the highway. It's a public charging facility. You're not going to see this in anybody's house unless Bill Gates maybe has one. That can charge a modern EV from 10 to 80%. So you roll in there with not much charge. 20 minutes later, you've got 80% in your battery. So that's a special purpose, but for certain things, it's really good. 84% of current EV owners have and use charging at home. So they always talked about one of the best things about EVs was having a full tank every morning. Well, depending on what you do. I mean, I don't charge that often, but you certainly can. Now, as somebody who has home charging, are you going to be at a public facility? Well, sure. You're going to do it when you're on a trip. You might be at a public charging facility because of manufacturers' incentives. A lot of cars you can go out there and buy today, they'll package up so many kilowatt hours of free charging at a certain network of chargers. So you might be there for that. Or you might be just doing it opportunistically. You happen to be someplace, you see that they've got charging, you think, what the heck, I'm going to be here an hour or two, I'm plugging in. The key is dwell time. What do I mean by dwell time? How long are you going to be at a place? If you're going to be at a rest stop for 20 minutes, you need a level 3 fast charger. You can't put enough in with a level 2 to make it worth your time. If you're going to be there for an hour or two, let's say you're going to a restaurant, or you're going to a movie, or whatever it is you're doing, a level 2 charger might be great. You can plug in, you'll add maybe 30 miles of range over the time that you're in the restaurant. It looks good. If you're going to be parked at work for 8 hours a day, you can plug into a level 1. Why not? Just sort of trickle charge it the whole time you're at work. So all three of these levels of charger are going to have their applications. There's going to be a reason why your facility might want to have one or two of these kinds of things. Level ones are totally inexpensive. You've already got plugs in the wall. So no unique electricity requirement, low maintenance. It's slow, but you know, if you've got employees who are parked there all day long, if you've got a multi-unit residential area, that might be fine. If you're somebody who commutes and doesn't go very far, you might just want to plug in at home, and there it is. Level twos, and these are what are out there the most. You see more level twos than anything else out there. They're moderately expensive, right? If you had to put in a dryer outlet, there's some cost to that. But the electrical requirement can usually be served by whatever you have. There's some maintenance and management required. Where might you use this? Well, again, employee parking, multi-unit residential, single-family homes. I have one. Most of the people that own EVs with big batteries have a level 2 charger. Shopping center. Level 2 would be great at a shopping center because there's going to be some dwell time. They're going to be at the market for an hour. They're going to be at the movie theater for 2, restaurant, whatever it is. That's a good place for a level 2 charger. Level 3, now you're talking real money, high power requirement, maintenance intensive. Where would you put that? Well, if you're the Wawa on 611 right next to 202, that's where you put level 3 chargers, because you got people coming off and you want them to go there and charge there, eat your snacks, get back in their car and go. So if you're a public location close to major routes, or if you're running a fleet, those are the 2 reasons why you might consider putting in a level 3. So if you're a property owner, how should you look at this as an opportunity? Well, let's say you have an apartment complex. There's a potential revenue stream there. You are going to have people who want to rent from you who drive an EV. So there's a revenue stream that you can capture from them. It's also a distinguishing feature compared to other properties, because very frankly, it's much more convenient to charge at home than it is to find a public charger. Shopping center, same thing. You've got a revenue stream. It may also be an attractive amenity to lure EV owners to spend time in the tenant stores or restaurants. If you have a large employee parking lot, it could be a benefit to your employees, because some of them will be driving EVs more and more over time. And it's also a possible revenue stream depending on how you want to configure that. If you want a truck stop, you're going to want a level 3 charger in there sooner or later, because the EVs are going to be coming. Restaurants or stores convenient to a major route, same thing. Competitive advantage, revenue stream, luring those EV owners to spend time and money there. Okay, let me turn it over to Sean.
All right, thank you. I think you're going to hear some common themes running through our presentations today. But I'm here to represent Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. And the main goals and purposes of DVRPC is to plan for a connected multimodal transportation network for Philadelphia and the surrounding 8 counties. You know, and a necessary component, because of the economic and environmental benefits of electric vehicles, it's a necessary component of our planning of an interconnected multimodal network to plan for electric vehicles and the infrastructure, the public infrastructure that it could take to support those. Essentially, we want to make sure from a planning perspective, a regional planning perspective, that we help to plan and fill the infrastructure gaps. So that folks have an opportunity to charge at public places regardless of their trip, whether they're taking local trips for errands or around town, or whether they're commuting from Doylestown to Warminster or Warrington, or if they're doing interstate long-distance travel, right? regionally to connect that intermodal transportation system. We want to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, that folks that own EVs have an opportunity and have the confidence that they'll be able to find a charger to complete that trip. But we also want to make sure that the benefits are spread to all the communities across our region. We want to make sure that these opportunities are shared with our rural areas and our downtowns. And even in those communities that may not get the private investment to have public chargers, we want to support our municipal and county and local governments to make sure that there are public charger opportunities in those places so that everybody can participate in that EV ownership and the benefits, the environmental, the economic benefits of owning EVs and having EV fleets and EV ownership in our communities, right? And so functionally, we see the role of government to make sure that those infrastructure gaps are filled. Planning on a regional basis, where is there EV infrastructure? Where can we help support the development of EV infrastructure on those transportation networks? But we also want to fill gaps and opportunities. So places that have concentrations of row homes, twins, places without garages, places of concentrations of apartment buildings or townhomes, have opportunities for public charging in their communities. So if they can't charge at home, there's a safety valve, there's a release valve, there's a place where they can charge. Because it's also a function of government to provide those economic development tools, right? And as Mr. Sawyer had mentioned, right, that you can attract business to your cultural center, to your shopping center, to your Wawa. You know, you can attract business to those places as a differentiator if you have opportunities to charge, or if you're renting, in apartment buildings and those kind of things. These can be a differentiator, having opportunities for EV chargers. The one thing we don't want is folks to just put EV chargers in places because they can or because they think they might want to, right? We want you to think about it. We want you to think strategically and identify who you're going to serve with that charger. And there are plenty of statistics, there's plenty of data out there to help you identify why you might want an EV charger on your property. Are you on a highway, a heavily traveled highway with over 10,000 vehicles a day? Well, that's a great place to attract people off the highway to shop in your shopping center, right? Are you in a municipality that may have a high concentration of electric vehicle ownership, but not necessarily a lot of public chargers? Doylestown has a considerable concentration of electric vehicles, right? Where's our public infrastructure for those folks either coming to Doylestown as tourists, coming to Doylestown as workers, or folks that just want that comfort of knowing when they're out taking, out doing errands, that they have a public place to charge, right? So know who your audience is when you're planning your EV infrastructure. DVRBC is currently collecting community input on where folks in our region want to see the kinds of chargers they want to see. We call those use cases. You know, is it a level 3 at a convenience store, or is it a level 2 at our community shopping center, or is it some other use case? And also our priority locations in our community, in our region. We're collecting this input so that we can help use that information in planning purposes for public infrastructure, support grant applications, make recommendations to our county and municipal governments where we think infrastructure is needed. Also, these results, PennDOT has a National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Funding Program. Their plan is in front of Federal Highway right now. Should that plan be approved, this input will be used to help PennDOT prioritize funding for EV charging stations. On May 22nd, our partners at Bucks TMA are going to be hosting a webinar on that information collection effort. We have a survey that's open until June 15th. I think there's a paper copy on the back if you can't take a picture of that QR code. But if you're planning locally, you're interested in investing in EV infrastructure, the PennDOT NEVI site has a great source of data that will tell you the concentration of electric vehicle registrations in your zip code in your town, the high traffic highways that run near your businesses. So that PennDOT NEVI site is a great place to get good planning data. And of course, you can always contact us at DVRBC for similar information. So thank you very much, and I think, Evan, you're next.
Good afternoon. My name is Evan Stone. I'm the Executive Director over at the Bucks County Planning Commission. Thank you all for coming out today for this important symposium on EVs. Now that it's my turn, I thought what I would try to do is relate the EV conversation. Sean and Kurt have given a lot of good basics, and I thought I would try to bring it back a little bit to Bucks County and how it affects us at the Planning Commission and how it may affect you in your community. So the first thing is EV sales. When we look at EV sales, we know that EVs continue to gain in popularity, and depending on which AI engine you check, they will tell you that 2024 was a banner year for EV sales in terms of the numbers of units that were sold. I happened to take a look at PennDOT's registration statistics for Bucks County. Every year they produce a report on the number of vehicles that are registered in each of the counties in Pennsylvania, and they also break out EV and hybrid. In 2023, they also added plug-in EV hybrids as well as fuel cell vehicles as part of the statistics that they keep. And what this chart tells us and shows us is that, as I said, EVs continue to grow in popularity. The number of them that we have in Bucks County continues to increase. It was interesting to note that in 2023, the number of hybrid vehicles that were registered in the county really took a huge jump. And a number of potential takeaways from those numbers. Plug-in EV hybrids, again, first year that they started to monitor this, they also are showing up in popularity. So as of 2023, EV hybrids and EV vehicles were about 5% of the vehicles that were registered here in Bucks County. And EV alone were about 1% of the total passenger vehicles that were registered here in the county. So you can start to see how these numbers are reflecting ownership and the adoption of EVs. And just coincidentally, before I came this afternoon, because when we met a couple days ago to go over the presentation, the 2024 numbers weren't out. Today they were. So just before I came over, I took a look. So in 2024, there were 8,200 EVs that were registered in the county. There were 9,300 hybrids, so there was a dip in the number of hybrids, but they still surpassed the number of EVs. And there were just about 3,500 plug-in EV hybrids in the county. So all told, the EV and hybrid as a percentage of vehicles are about 3.5%, and EVs alone have grown to about 1.4% of the number of vehicles. So if you're a business owner, what does this mean? Well, it means that they're gaining popularity. They are out there. And I think Kurt and Sean kind of touched on this. From our perspective, they become more, or they align themselves as an amenity as opposed to necessarily a necessity right now in certain situations. For you, there's a QR code up here. Feel free to scan it. This will take you to the resources that we as the Planning Commission put together. We started in March of 2023 with guidelines on charging stations, best practices, and standards to help give people some idea about the best way to locate them, things that you had to have, things that would be good to have when you put up EV charging stations. And then we followed that in December of 23 with a model ordinance for our municipalities. And I think I see Karen in the back, and I see Sinclair in the back, our zoning officers. So we produced this model ordinance to help our municipalities figure out the best way to guide and regulate the positioning and location of EV chargers in various locations. Some key things to take away from the work that we put together were that, as I said, EVs continue to increase in the number of EVs that are here in the county. Kurt touched on the level of charger is very dependent on the end user. Again, it's a different charger if you're at a movie theater versus a different charger if you're at a Wawa, and that makes a difference. EV spaces are allowed as an accessory use in all industrial, commercial, and institutional uses. And we also believe that EV charging stations should not be made in addition to the required number of parking spaces that you may be required to have at your business that you're running. And this is another topic, but we believe that we are overparked by a factor of about 3 here in Bucks County. And Steve Knowles in the audience, I'm sure he could back me up on that. And so we don't think that if you're required to have 100 spaces, we don't think you should have to have 101 spaces if you want to have EV charging, that you should simply be allowed to convert existing spaces to EV charging spaces. A couple other things that were touched on. EV charging infrastructure is certainly very important in multifamily developments where people don't have access to an individual garage, apartments, townhomes, things like that. So if you're in a municipal position and you see applications coming in for that, or you own those types of properties, you may want to think about adding that EV infrastructure. If you are building from the ground up, make-ready EV infrastructure is much cheaper at the beginning of a project than it is at the end of a project. Put the conduit, you may even run the wiring at the beginning, even if you don't put the charger in place. Make sure that your new facility is equipped to have that in the future. I also just wanted to touch on that the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Code, Title 75, has been updated to include enforcement around EV parking spaces. I checked with my daughter, who's a former police officer in Bristol Township, and she assures me that if you have a business and you have an EV space and somebody's parked there with their diesel pickup truck, you can certainly call the police and have them issued a citation, and Title 75 backs that up. I also wanted to let you know that if you own EV charging stations at your facility, the Bucks County Consumer Protection Department now has a device that can test the EV chargers to make sure that folks are buying and getting the chargers, the charge that they're paying for, which is a good thing. And lastly, I just wanted to note that effective of April 1st of this year, if you now register an EV or a plug-in EV, you will be paying a road user charge, known as a RUC fee, through PennDOT when you register your vehicle. And the reason for this is you're not buying gas. So you're not paying the gas tax, which pays for the maintenance and upkeep of the road. So to try to get some parity among the vehicles, they've now instituted this fee, and there's a chart up on the screen. You can see what that fee looks like. It's $200 in 2025, goes up to $250 in 2026, and then gets tied to the consumer price index after that. And then if you own a plug-in EV, you pay 25% of whatever that RUC fee is for your vehicle. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Evan. I just renewed the registration on my car. So the other flip side of the coin is I haven't paid gas taxes now in the last 4 years, so I'm okay with this. So what I want to talk about was, now that you have some background information on why you might want to put an EV charger in, is how do you get started? You know, what are the basics? How do you reduce this to practice? So a couple of things you need to think about is, what are your objectives? And Kurt and others have mentioned this already, but is this primarily an amenity for your customers? Are you trying to attract someone to your facility? Are you trying to generate revenue out of this? Is it for your employees primarily? Is it something that aligns with your values or your brand image? So, you know, think about why you want to do this, in addition to the other factors like location, for example. So where will you locate your chargers? We often talk about this amongst ourselves. This is not, I think initially this was seen as sort of preferred parking. It was close to the front door of a facility, just like, you know, handicap parking or parking for expectant mothers. But that's probably not the right way to think about it, because these people, you know, people who are driving EVs don't need any special consideration. And in fact, you're just going to encourage people to kind of poach those parking spots because they're the nicest parking spots. So think about where you want to put your chargers. If it's for your employees, maybe it is preferred parking. But if it's for customers, you know, then that would be a different story. Think about where your electrical infrastructure is, right? Because you're going to have to get electricity to this location. And that could be a substantial part of the cost of installing your charger. Another consideration is, do you want this to be findable? Do you want people to be able to locate this? Because I can tell you, in my car or on my cell phone, there are plenty of apps that will say, hey, tell me where the next charger is. Is there a charger if I want to go to this hotel, is there a charger at this hotel? Does this movie theater have a charger? And so that's a very handy feature, critical feature really, if you're trying to attract people to your location. Conversely, maybe you don't want to attract people. Maybe this is only for your employees, or you have a limited number of spots, and you don't really want to advertise this location. So you may not want to make it findable. So that would be a different kind of setup. So these are all things you should really be thinking about. And then what about your usage policy? What will you charge? Are you trying to generate some revenue here off the charger itself? In other words, if you're paying, let's say, 12 cents for a kilowatt hour of electricity, do you want to charge 15 cents or 16 cents or 20 cents so that you're generating some revenue? That's one way to think about it. Maybe you want to make it a break-even proposition. You have a hotel, and you're going to make the charging, let's say, cost neutral, maybe even free, but you're going to generate revenue by increasing the room costs per night. The same might apply, let's say, at an apartment complex or a condo complex where maybe the charging is free or it has a nominal price, but you're generating revenue by attracting people to your facility. You can make it free, and occasionally you can find free charging, but I don't advocate it because it just brings a whole host of other kinds of issues with it. How long can someone remain in a spot? Now, if someone goes there and parks in a spot over the weekend, is that okay or not? And there's different ways to handle this. Most chargers, if you plug into a charger, you can set your charger up to know when the charging is stopped, and that charger now will notify the driver, you've got to move your car now. And if you don't move your car, the fees are going to go up. They're going to continue to charge you, but at an accelerated rate. So the charging may be very inexpensive, but the idling fees to remain there may be actually much more expensive. So you are incentivized to move your car as quickly as possible. That doesn't always work, but it's a good system. How will you enforce the parking rules around your charger? So if someone blocks it, as Evan mentioned, you can call the police. Are you going to just have a laissez-faire policy towards that? It's something you want to think about when you're putting in your chargers. Now, I have opinions on how all these things could be handled, but you don't have to listen to me. The good news here is that there are loads and loads and loads of turnkey operations that will help you provide charging services. This is just a quick survey of some of the most popular ones. We're not advocating for any one of these, but you will see these names out there in the world as charging providers. ChargePoint usually does level 2 charging. That's what the township has out here in the parking lot. EVgo and Electrify America, I think, typically do level 3 charging. But these people are just in business to help facilitate you putting a charger into your facility. And they will ask you all these questions that I just mentioned. Where do you want to put it? What's the purpose? How much do you want to charge? So on and so forth. And of course, you will set up a contract with them, and you can require them to connect you to the internet, to adjust your fees, to enforce your policies, and to do the maintenance. Right. So this can be essentially a hands-off operation for you, by going through one of these providers. One of the other things that they will do is try to locate funding sources for you. And that's the last thing I want to talk about is financial resources, because there are a number of resources available, and Sean has already talked about the NEVI grants, which are to put infrastructure, particularly along corridors, and this is federal money, which was authorized under, I don't know if it was the Inflation Reduction Act or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but money was allocated under the previous administration to provide EV infrastructure on these corridors and other locations. Now, of course, with the change in the administration, this money now is, I will say, at risk. I don't know what the status is today, but I don't think we can count on that 100%. However, the NEVI grants are administered through the state, and I did speak with the state, and they assured me, because this is state money, that these grants will continue to flow. So the NEVI grants are for alternative fuel, I'm sorry, I meant the AFIG grants. The alternative fuel grants, AFIG, are provided through the state. So this is money that comes from the state, and it goes to municipalities, schools, businesses, and nonprofits. This covers some costs towards the purchase of EVs and EV fueling equipment and infrastructure. So this money can be accessed to help you put in your chargers. And this can be very substantial. This can be, tens of thousands of dollars. I think the limit might have been $60,000 in some cases, maybe even more than that. Sean, do you know the limit on the AFIG grants? Yeah, it's substantial money. It's real money. That's something that the providers will look into for you, or you can yourself. The state is very anxious to work with you to enable these grants. The other source of funding is PICO, and PICO has a program called EV Smart, and they have two separate programs. One they call the L2 program, which is, I think, primarily for homeowners or small businesses, and then they have another program which is called the Public Benefit. And these have been funded through May of 2029. And these provide grants up to 50% of costs to a maximum of $60,000 for equipment and installation. The $60,000, I think, is for the Public Benefit program. I think for the L2 program, I think it's closer to like $8,000 or $10,000. So, and again, I won't say that I'm an expert on these things, but again, the providers will help you find these grants. And there is substantial money out there to enable these things, so you don't have to bear the full cost of it. So I'm just going to stop there, and I think it's time for questions.
Okay, thank you all for your presentations. Yes, does anybody have questions? And if you have one, we're going to share the microphone and just kind of bring that around to you.
We got some questions?
Yep, one in the back.
All right, I'll come to you, Karen.
Hi, Karen Highland, Doylestown Borough. I have a question about on-street charging for on-street parking, which is something we struggle with. There doesn't seem to be a standard charging location on vehicles. Oftentimes it's on the driver's side, which tends to be the street side. Is there infrastructure in place for on-street parking that sort of overcomes that obstacle that anyone's aware of?
It's a great question, and I'm not familiar with any one particular
Evan, can you use the microphone, please?
manufacturer that has anything to deal with that. And one of the ways we first got involved was a call from Bristol Borough, who said, we have folks parking out in front of their house and running electric cords across the sidewalk. What can we do? And there's a whole host of issues there about how those spots are assigned, but there are guidelines in the documents that we have, both in our ordinance and in our best management practices, that talk about how these should be set up in public right-of-ways on the street.
Okay, thanks.
I think Narberth Borough tried to set up an on-street parking with pole-adjacent chargers. Flow was the company. And it really turned into much like the city of Philadelphia's problem with, EV charging is a parking problem.
Right.
And that's always going to be your challenge. When Narberth tried it, folks weren't happy that some people had preferred parking in front of their houses that wasn't accessible to everybody. So that's really, putting it on a corner where there aren't other uses is key, right?
I was going to say, in a municipal parking lot,
Or,
if the
yeah.
municipality owns the parking lot, that's probably a better location. And then through all of your promotional materials, try to direct those who have the EVs to the municipal lots versus on street.
We've had residents who are willing to put it in themselves on the sidewalk to accommodate their own vehicles. Obviously, they do then get preferred parking, but it's on the street side most of the time for the vehicle. And my concern is that we've now got additional things sticking out into the street. What's the borough's responsibility? And unlike Township, don't have an abundance of parking. We've got a parking shortage in the borough, so.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for today. This is wonderful. So I'm with Moravian Pottery and Tile Works, and we're actually located on county property. We're in a county park. So we're really very well suited for this. But I have no idea what kind of final costs. If 60 grand is the max of a grant, obviously this is a bigger number than I thought. So for one charging station, level 2, at a place like, the county park that surrounds our property, can you ballpark what installation and purchase costs?
Andrea, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you happen to know, so we have 2 charges right here. Do you happen to know what we spent on that? Do you know?
Stephanie might.
Stephanie Mason, Township Manager. When we did ours, and Steve Knowles here from Bucks TMA, they ran about 15. I think when we had to do ours, we got the grant. It was about 10, 12. And then with all the infrastructure we had to do, by the time we were probably said and done, it was shy of about 30. So, yeah. Now, we've also put in for another grant through PICO. We're waiting to hear on that. But, it's going to hopefully cover at least half. And so we're going to look to, do something like that. So.
I just wanted to point out that that's for level 2. You don't have to necessarily do level 2. You could do level 1. It's going to be slower, but for some people, that's enough.
So if you do level 1, what happens to the price? How dramatically different is it?
I think you're going to have to probably check with the manufacturers and see, unless Kurt has
So
an idea.
level 1, frankly, it's an electrical outlet, right? So it depends. If you want to charge for it, then you've got some infrastructure. If you don't want to charge for it, if you just want to have it as an amenity, you just basically have to have a plug out there. So whatever it costs you. Now, if you've got a light pole in a parking lot, at the bottom of that can be an electrical outlet, and you've got charging, right? So it's not complicated to do level 1, other than there's got to be an access point to the electricity.
Yeah, and I mean, for homeowners, like most of us, or the people that have electric vehicles, we have the 240, and we put it in our house. So we're not talking about spending a lot of money. We're running a line probably from our fuse box and across to wherever we put the charger. Maybe it's $1,500. I guess the issue really is getting the electric to wherever you need it in the parking lot.
Right, and if you want to do a level 2 charge point charger, you can buy that on Amazon. I just did. So,
Yeah.
these are ubiquitous now. These things are all out there. There's all kinds of different chargers and things. The charger itself figures $600 to $800, and then the electrical power to that spot. And, you can have an electrician run a 240 line. So now, commercially, again, if you want to make it a revenue stream, that's another animal, right? I have a charge point charger. I could theoretically turn that into a public use. I don't want people in my garage, frankly. So, but, the actual pieces aren't very expensive. It's how do you get it all to the place that you want it? That's where it gets costly.
Yeah, and I would add a note of caution. Where you get the money from really matters. Federal funds, the cost will be twice of the state-funded project, just because of the requirements and all the steps and ADA compliance and all the components and all the considerations. So if you're a local government, maybe federal money makes sense because you have folks and engineers that know how to handle and manage that kind of project. But as a private company, individual, you may want to look into state funding because it does not come with those restrictions and the costs go way down.
The minimums on the federal funding too are so high that it's really impractical.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Jeff from Penn Color. I'm really interested. First of all, thank you to the panel and Judy for this. This is really fantastic. A lot of great information. This getting started slide here is awesome. Real quick question. Are we going to get a copy of these slides by any chance that I could share with some of the people back home?
Yeah, I'm sure we can
That's
send
great.
those out.
I did have a question. We obviously are not in the public sector, but we are trying to attract really good people. And as you probably are aware, as we're going to the younger generations, there's a lot more appetite for EVs and greener technologies. So one of the things we want to be sensitive to is making sure that we're building up our infrastructure to be able to support that. I was wondering if there's any knowledge about or any projections on what we can expect over the next, say, 5 years in growth in that marketplace and how we should build up and be prepared for that.
Let me grab that one for a second, and then you guys can chime in. So as we were putting together our climate action plan, we were looking at the build on EVs, and actually the United States is behind, right? I mean, more than half the cars sold in China right now are EVs. 95% of the ones sold in Norway are EVs. So we're kind of behind the curve, but we expect this to ramp. And so our expectation was over the course of the next 25 years, over 60% of the domestic fleet of cars and light trucks would be EVs. So this is going to be the norm over the course of time. It just takes a while. We've got millions and millions of vehicles that are going to have to run to the end of their lives before people are even going to consider buying the next one. So, and people are keeping cars longer than they used to. So it just takes a long time for that installed base to turn completely over. And that's why we think over the course of the next 2.5 decades, we'll get to about 60% or a little north of that in the total fleet. But what that implies is every year, a greater and greater percentage of the cars that are sold are EVs. And it makes sense. The cost of operating an EV is lower than the cost of operating a gas engine car. The only thing that has kind of held the market back a little bit is the price initially was higher. Even though it might pay back over a long period of time, the price initially was higher. Well, that's disappearing now. First place, now there are used EVs available. For the longest time, you had to buy new, and less than half the people in the U.S. buy new anyway. The average price point of a new vehicle today in the United States is pushing $50,000. I don't mean EVs. That's just a car. So that's an impediment for part of the population. As we start to get more and more EVs in the pipeline, more and more used ones come out, they're a bargain, very frankly. And so now you've got more people adopting EVs because the price point is not as steep and the operating cost is lower. So you're going to see it. It's coming. It's going to get faster and faster. Frankly, if we let Chinese cars in today, they would fly out the door because they're at a discount to gas cars in China. They're at a discount to gas cars in Europe. So we're keeping them out, but that's why we're a little bit behind in terms of the adoption rate. Did that get sufficiently to your question?
Yes, you give me a lot of information about the obviously. It's hard to project what construction we should be building today in preparation for 5 years from now. The numbers you talk about give me a sense of what we think.
Well, I know when we were prepping for this meeting, Kurt brought up how trickle charging can be really effective at a place of business because you're parked there for 8 hours. So in terms of employees, you don't have to put in a lot of infrastructure in order to have a trickle charge. So whether you would, want to put that as a money-making, or charge for that, or if you just would give that as an employee benefit, that might be something pretty easy to look at. And I don't know who would design something like that in terms of if we're not using an actual charger or not using one of the big companies that you went over. How would you learn how to set up where a trickle charge could go?
It's really just a matter of where do you have access to electricity. So, if you've got a employee parking lot and it's got light posts every so often, right? Typical configuration. Every one of those can be an outlet. It can be an outlet on 2 sides, right? So you've got 2 cars served by that one light post. That's not expensive. Yes, you'd have to hire an electrician, but it's not expensive. So if you've got that, now if you want to put in more, then you're running copper wire. And that's expensive, you know, sort of per foot, but, you know, it's a one-time.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Could you just explain the RUC fees to me again? You register your electric vehicle, and then you pay those fees to who? The state?
Yeah, it's PA Department, PennDOT. You pay it to PennDOT. So every time you register your vehicle now, you have to pay the RUC fees if you have an electric vehicle.
So with a gas station, you have yearly inspections that are done. Is the township, the state, the federal government going to put any inspection requirements on public EV chargers? I mean, I assume you would have to do permits for electric installation and stuff like that. But are you going to be doing annual inspections on a public EV charger?
Yeah, with the charger itself, yes.
Yeah, my understanding, particularly at the county level, is that just like they go out and they inspect the gas pumps, they will now start inspecting these EV charging stations to make sure that they're operable and producing what they're supposed to be producing and that the consumer is getting what they pay for. Part of the difficulty was the technology to do that hadn't caught up with the chargers, but now it has, and there's still very few companies that make it. I actually believe there's one here in Bucks County that does it, and that's the outfit that the county is using.
I manage HOAs and condominiums, so if we were to put a large charger in, even though it's on private property, as a community property, you would still come in and inspect them.
That's a good question.
If you're charging for it, I think is the answer. If you provide it as an amenity, have at it. But if you're charging the public for use, then I think it'll get inspected.
Sinclair?
Another question?
And if you use public money to build it, it'll have uptime requirements, so there will be internet connectivity, and there'll be a record of how often, you know, how much it's used and how long it's functional, and the percentage of time that it's functional.
Does it need internet? Is that the question?
So I guess you need internet too.
If it's publicly
You're
funded.
not just putting an electric line in, you're putting an internet line in as well.
Yeah, if it's a publicly, if you get a grant to put it in there, that's one of the requirements. I don't know that that's, you know, again, if it's an amenity,
Right.
it's not a responsibility.
Like,
Any of the public networks that you put in, so if you put in a charge point or an Electrify America or something like that, those are all internet enabled because you need to be able to contact those through the apps, through your car, et cetera. So that's all part of the package that you're going to get if you partner with one of those folks. Because, you know, I could tell you right now whether that charger out in the parking lot is in use or not, because ChargePoint monitors it and it'll tell me right on my app on my phone. And my car will also know. So the EV network and the chargers are all much more intimately connected. I can't tell you who's using a gas pump down at the Exxon station, but I can tell you if somebody's using the ChargePoint charger.
yeah, I mean, one of the panelists we thought about or just inviting to come was one of the service providers like the Blink or the ChargePoint. They would probably be able to give you, come out to your specific location and give you information, everything that you might need in terms of setting it up, in terms of specifics, the cost, the internet, and what they're going to package, you know, how much you decide to pay for it. One of the concerns I always have is that people are parking at the EV charger and not just charging at the EV charger. So I hope you caught the point that one of the panelists made was, you know, you're going to pay an okay rate, maybe 59 cents is it a kilowatt hour? It's 59 cents. But if I overstay and my battery is up to 80%, then I'm going to be charged a lot more to dwell there because you want to encourage those people to go off. And then when I look at my phone, I can see how much I'm being charged. I can see how full that is because generally all the Blinks, You have to get their app in order to use it on your phone, and they charge my credit card for that. So I hope that makes sense, but they would be a really great source of information for you too.
Yeah, thank you. Sinclair Salisbury, Director of Code Enforcement here at the Township. Yeah, there is a lot of electrical safety issues that need to be taken into account on any installation, whether it's residential or commercial. As you said, you can buy on the internet, say, a level 2 charger. Well, we still have quite a lot of older homes in this township which still only have maybe a 60 amp breaker box, not a 200 amp service. And so you always need to, or our requirement is in the township, that you would get an electrical permit application, have the installation reviewed by an electrical underwriter, and then when the installation is complete, it would then again be inspected by an underwriter to make sure it was safe. Commercially, again, you would want to know, say you have a business and they suddenly want to add 10 chargers to make money. Well, you need to know that the electrical service to that business is, again, safe. So we would require plan reviews, permit reviews. You also need zoning review and accessibility review. In Pennsylvania, all electrical installations and building installations have to comply with the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code. This July, we're expecting to go to the 2021 code, actually. It's an update. That has even more, or it has a lot more EV regulations within it. But apart from those regulations, which will have to be followed, any business owner would have to comply with the American with Disabilities Act, and that requires 5% of any charger, the first one, and 5% of any future ones you put in, to comply with accessibility requirements. So immediately, at the location that you want to put a commercial charger, you may have to restripe your parking area to account for a handicap accessible spot. The equipment you buy, the first one and 5% of them have to be accessible. And this would also apply for ones put into, say, a community, because they're not private. They're sort of out there for probably guests as well as homeowners. So yeah, permit and plan review is very important. The other thing is, I see Ernie over here from the hospital. I don't know if you're considering, or maybe you have, I don't know, EV chargers within any enclosed situation, like a parking garage. There are now, there's a lot of fire safety requirements that are being looked at now, and I'm not sure that it's all being worked out with EV vehicles especially. If they catch fire within an enclosed situation, they're extremely difficult to put out, those fires. So there's a lot being looked at under the building codes with EV charging. It's not just the chargers, it's the batteries that go with these vehicles. So we're actually talking to some of the car dealerships, for instance. How are you storing all these batteries that are going for these cars? They're really a considerable fire safety risk. So with EV vehicles, there's a lot involved when you're adding infrastructure or adding vehicles. So again, the recommendation and requirement is that you always get an electrical permit as a base for residential properties, and again, commercial, there's even more reviews involved.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good information. I think whether you have a gas station, you have to worry about fires as well there. You need to make sure that you have the permits and that you have the right safety precautions in place. So is there anything else? If not, I just want to have one quick comment. Kurt, you talked about when you go out for a drive or you travel someplace, how do you pick where you stop?
I have a very simple algorithm. I look for a restaurant that I want to eat at that's adjacent to a charger. So, and I have a favorite place picked out in New York already that's next to what used to be called the Tappan Zee Bridge. Lovely Italian restaurant. adjacent to 6 EVgo chargers. So that's my algorithm.
Yes, I think a lot of Bucks County tourists will probably be doing the same thing. So if there's not any more questions, we're right at 5 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. We're happy to send you the PowerPoint presentation, or if you have any questions, get in touch with us. And we thank you very much for your attention and for coming out today.
Thank you.